what we're going to take a look at here is now the next progression in the adding and subtracting rational expressions. And now we're going to look at things that do not have like denominators, things that are going to have different denominators. So before we get into the rational expression ones, let's quickly just kind of go over what we have to do. Now, for the most part, this should be a review, looking at how we're going to find the common denominator, because obviously I can't add these two things right now. Talking in class, what we can really do here is, well, we need to make the same denominator. How I can do that is by multiplying the top and the bottom by 2 here. It would give me 2 over 6 plus 1 over 6. And then I have the common denominators, just add straight across. I have 3 over 6, which can reduce to 1 over 2. Same idea over here, but now what we have to end up doing is we have to multiply by 3 over 3 here and by 4 over 4 here, because 12 is what's called our least common denominator. Alright, we need to figure out what the smallest number is that both 4 and 3 go into. In this case, it would be 12. So looking at what we'd have, once we go through and actually do the multiplication, we would have, that should be 9, over 12, and then again I would go straight through and just add, which would give me 13 twelfths. Okay, and that I cannot simplify, so I would be done with that there. Now we're going to really use the same philosophy when we look at rational expressions. Okay, and what we'll actually start with is the one on the right, when we're looking at the subtraction here. Now, when I look at these two denominators, this one has 2x, this one has a 2, the LCD of these two things would be 2x. Okay, because they already share a 2. Now this one over here just needs an x. So what I would multiply by is by x over x. So what that's going to give me is 1 over 2x, subtracted by 3x over 2x. And now, just like the last problem, I'm going to go through and just combine my numerators. So I would have 1 minus 3x over 2x. Alright, and that would end up being my final answer, because there's nothing I can reduce there. Unless if you wanted to kind of divide both things by 2x, really doesn't make anything much simpler, so that's okay for our final answer. Now, same thing over here. We're adding 7 over x and 3 over y. This is kind of like that second example on the last page, because right now, this has an x, this has a y. What I'm going to need to go through and do is multiply this one by x over x, and this one by y over y, because my LCD is xy. I'm looking for the smallest thing that I could, that x and y both go into. So, if I went through and did that, I would have 7y over xy plus 3x over xy. And then again, from here I have the same denominator. I just go right across and add 7y plus 3x all over xy. Nothing I can simplify here. That would be my final answer. And really, that's all we're going to look at for the most part with these. If we have that concept down, we're going to be good on these other kinds of problems. Because if I take a look at this one, now, basically the same philosophy. Here I have x minus 2 as a term. Over here I have 2 minus x. So what that means is I need to find the LCD, and just like what I would do before is, well, I have an x minus 2 in this term. Over here I have 2 minus x. So that's really going to be my LCD if I just take those two things. So this one on the right hand side, I need to multiply it by x minus 2 to end up getting it to this LCD. So then I would multiply the top by x minus 2 as well. Then on the other side, what I would multiply by is 2 minus x, because that is what's going to bring me to something just like this very first problem, where I multiplied by 3 over here and 4 over here to get it to 12. The same exact idea with this, because I have the x minus 2 on this one and I have 2 minus x here. Those are different. Okay, so then I went about just multiplying this by x minus 2, this one by 2 minus x. Now when I go through and do that, there's a lot of simplifying here, because now I have to multiply these top things together. So I'm going to have to distribute 6 to both. So I'm going to have 12 minus 6x, all of that being over 2 minus x, x minus 2. Okay, and I'm going to add that to here. I would have to FOIL. I'm going to have to distribute all of those things through. X squared minus 2x plus 3x minus 6. All of that being over 2 minus x, x minus 2. Now, if I look at this, one of the questions is, well, how do I know to FOIL the top and why am I not doing it to the bottom? The bottom we already know, on both sides of these fractions it's the same, so I don't really need to mess with that right now. I can just leave it how it is. The top we don't know because I need to actually combine these things into 2, so really what I'm working with now is the top. I already have common denominators, so those can just stay the way they are. But to continue on the top, okay, I'm going to just combine my like terms, so I'm going to have x squared, that's supposed to be a subtraction sign, remember, so it would be plus x minus 6 over 2 minus x minus 2. Alright, and then from there what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight through and add these things up. So I'm going to just combine everything. So I would have 1x squared term, let's do it this way. Okay, plus x squared plus x minus 6 all over that common denominator, 2 minus x minus 2. Alright, combine all of our like terms. What that gives us is x squared minus 5x plus 6 all over my 2 minus x and x minus 2. But I can go through, now I'm going to see if I can simplify, and in this case I can factor the top, and that's kind of why we left the bottom the way it is, because we want to see if we can simplify all the way in the end. So we'll reduce that to x minus 2, x minus 3, all that being over 2 minus x minus 2. If I notice, those two things cancel out. What that ultimately gives me would be x minus 3 over 2 minus x. That's our whole process. Now let's kind of look at again what we did. We first had to find the common denominator. Once we found the common denominator, it's basically the same as what we were doing on Friday when we were looking at adding and subtracting these with like denominators. Because once we have the like denominators, we just combine the numerators and simplified. Okay, so that's exactly the same as what we've been doing. Here's where it's different, and we had talked about that before. Here I have an x minus 2, here I have a 2 minus x, so what that means is this right side needs an x minus 2 to get to the LCD. This side needs a 2 minus x to get to my LCD. Okay, and we're going to take a look at one more example of this. Okay, because now, if I take a look at what I have here, this one looks more complicated, but now essentially it's going to end up being the same thing. And what I'm going to want to do is, I'm focusing on the denominators. Okay, so the numerator means nothing to me right now. When I look at this denominator, what I need to know is, looking at it, I need to know what my LCD is going to be. Okay, to do that, what I would say is factor the bottom if you need to over here. So what that's going to end up factoring to is x minus 4, x plus 2. Okay, I'm not going to do anything to the top, because again, we're only worrying about the denominator right now. So when I get to this point, if I notice, I already have an x plus 2 over here. I have an x plus 2 here. All I'm missing now, so that means that's in my LCD, all I'm missing is this x minus 4 that this right side has. So if I go through and I multiply this right hand side by x minus 4 and x minus 4, now I'm going to have my common denominator that I was looking for on this left hand side, which is the same exact thing as the right. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that. Again, you have to identify what your LCD is, kind of like what you're missing. On the right hand side I have x minus 4 and x plus 2. Right now here I only had x plus 2. I need to create an x minus 4, which I do with this multiplication. Now just like I said before, we're good with the denominators, so we don't have to worry about those anymore. Those are just going to stay. You can leave them in this form. But what I need to do on the top now is multiply this thing through. So it's going to give me x squared minus 2x minus 4x plus 8. And all that is over x minus 4, x plus 2, subtracted by x squared minus 7x plus 6, all over x minus 4, and x plus 2. Now, what we're going to go through and do is combine these things. Remember, we're looking at subtraction here. We're looking at subtraction, so what that means, and honestly, we can combine these two things. Okay, that's going to be just negative 6x with those two things. So I'm going to kind of jump a step, combining those two like terms right here. These two. Just combining those would become negative 6x, which I write here. Now I'm subtracting though. So what that's telling me is I am subtracting x squared. I'm subtracting a negative 7x, so that's adding 7x. And I'm subtracting 6. So that would be minus 6. Okay, we have to remember that negative sign goes to everything on that side. And then I would just have x minus 4 and x plus 2. Now I go through and I combine all of my like terms. So looking at this, x squared minus x squared is going to give you 0x squared. So I don't even need to write anything. Those two things cancel each other out. Negative 6x and 7x, that's going to give you x. 8 and negative 6 gives you 2. Looking at all of that, a lot of that stuff ended up canceling other parts out. Now I can see this is a much easier simplification. I don't have anything to factor. Those two would cancel. I would be left with 1 over x minus 4. Okay, so again, once we got to this point, everything is the same as the first day we were adding and subtracting. You know, we distribute the negative sign to each of these things, we combine all the like terms, then we simplify when we need to, all the way down to here. But the hardest part is this, just identifying, creating that least common denominator in both of these things. Now, what you are going to do, what I want you to do, jot down these two. Okay, so pause the video, and you're going to try them. And what I'm going to end up going through and doing is I'm going to just put the answers up, and you'll be able to check your work, see where you went. You can kind of pause the video with that as well. But, you know, pause it now, write these two down, give them a try, and then we can check them in a little bit. Or you can check. Alright, so let's look at these one by one. Our answer to the first one should have ended up being x squared minus 5x minus 10 over x minus 3 times x plus 5. If we look at all of our work, again, here I have x plus 5, and over here I have x minus 3. So what that means is my LCD is going to be x plus 5 times x minus 3. So I need to create that on both sides. Over here I'd have to multiply by x plus 5 over x plus 5. Over here I have to multiply by x minus 3 over x minus 3. And that's what I kind of go through and do. Distribute. That gives me x squared minus 3x. That gives me 2x plus 10. I'm subtracting both of these, so the signs have to flip. And have my common denominator. Here, usually, you end up having something that can factor. It's okay if you don't. Like, if you get something that you obviously can't factor, then that's okay. It would just stay like this, which is totally fine. Now, this side, same idea. Again, we're working denominators first, so I don't even need to touch that. I wouldn't even know how to factor that to begin with. But I can factor the denominator, and if I look at that, I already have in my LCD on both sides I have an x minus 7, so what I need is an x plus 3 on the left, and I need to go through and I need to create that. So I multiply by x plus 3 over x plus 3. I go through, same approach as before. I would FOIL all of this, or distribute through. I distribute the x across, distribute the 3 across. That gives me all of this. And again, just like the last time I combined the 2x and 3x to give me 5x. The negative sign gets distributed to each of those terms, so it would be negative x squared minus 4x minus 13. When I combine all of those things, it gives me x minus 7. And then the x minus 7 on the top and bottom cancel, giving me 1 over x plus 3. So, again, just kind of recap it. When you're looking at these things, work with the denominator first until you have a common denominator, and then just leave it. You don't need to go through and FOIL, just leave it, and then manipulate everything on the top. You know, on the top, you're going to have to multiply binomials, you're going to have to distribute things. That's okay, because usually you're going to get something like this right-hand side where something will cancel. Usually. Okay, if not, don't get too spooked. It's totally fine, just like we had over here.